his body ballooned, and it was all over the internet, right? Some pictures it didn't look as bad. Some pictures it looked like this guy could probably star in My 600-Pound Life.
Would you fall for me like I fall for you?
Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're gonna get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson is flying through the media right now. He is everywhere. If you're talking NBA, he's kind of all over the place right now, and a lot of that stems back to not even just the start of this season, but the start of his career. The draft choice of him has become more in question this year, with especially with the Grizzlies' surge into the top of the Western Conference with Ja Morant. And obviously Ja Morant being the second overall pick, one pick behind Zion Williamson in their respective draft class. So, talks around him have continued to swirl throughout the media, throughout NBA YouTube, throughout just NBA fans in general, and even throughout casual NBA fans. I mean, Zion's a guy that's known by many people because of the publicity that he was able to garner, not only in high school. I mean, he had Drake showing up to his games and stuff like that in high school, but in college, his Duke games, when he, RJ, and Cam Reddish were there, were, the tickets to go to those games, some of those games, were more than NBA Finals tickets. So this was a guy that was garnering attention prior to being in the NBA, and now that he's, I guess, in the NBA. I mean, he hasn't played all year, and how many games he's played in his career is not what we expected maybe at this point, because we expected, potentially injuries would arise, but maybe not quite this early. But regardless, because of all that attention that not only he could garner before the NBA, but he's now has in the NBA, everybody knows about him. Everybody's talking about the situation, about how he isn't playing, and in large part, this has continued to grow due to comments CJ McCollum made when, on national television about, how Zion Williamson still hadn't reached out to him multiple games after he'd been with the Pelicans, not even just hours or anything like that, but multiple games. Obviously, how it almost feels like this year Zion isn't even a part of the Pelicans. He's kind of just getting his paychecks, doing his own thing, trying, I guess, to rehab and all this other sorts of stuff. And all that has kind of swirled the conversation around him. And not only did you get CJ's comments, but that was compounded by JJ Redick going on First Take, and JJ Redick obviously being a long-time tenured vet of the NBA, just recently retiring, but was Zion's teammate. And so he, has that kind of inside knowledge. He was Zion's vet, really, is I think the way that we're perceived as it in the media, and the way that Zion has kind of and his camp has kind of gone about it. He was Zion's vet when he went there, right? Obviously, when you think of like a rookie or a young player to an older player's vet, young guy comparison, I think the one that always jumps out, and probably will jump out to most people for a very long time, is the Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler thing. How, when Jimmy Butler went there, it was almost like an instant connection between the two, where Jimmy is his vet type thing, right? And apparently JJ was that for Zion, right? Maybe we didn't see it as much because it wasn't pushed as much in the media or anything like that, but behind the scenes, that's how that was working. So he's a guy that, has knowledge on that, and he goes on First Take, and he kind of talks about, yes, Zion can at times be a detached teammate, and maybe not, as his teammate or whatever, you might not feel that he's all the way there or whatever, even though he potentially could be. But JJ himself, whenever a new teammate would get brought to the team, or a potential of a new teammate would get brought to the team, like whether it be a guy in free agency or whatever, he's reaching out to that guy. And I think the specific example that he used of a guy in free agency was Wesley Matthews, where he said, like, look, I'm reaching out to him. I'm trying to get him to the Sixers. I'm welcoming him to the Sixers if they're being traded here or signing here or whatever. And JJ Redick was a role player for his entire career. So for him to say that, I do think is something that it's a bit shocking. I think once we heard it from CJ, it was pretty shocking that Zion hadn't reached out to him, because we know kind of as an NBA fan, you can picture what the reasoning behind that trade was. It was to bring in another guy that can create offense on the perimeter around Zion, try and keep him happy and everything like that. Obviously, he hasn't played all year, but obviously also try and help them push for the playoffs this year, with or without him. And it's kind of weird to not see your star and franchise player reach out to a guy that isn't even just some like guy you just signed on a 10-day or something like that. Like, it's a guy that's going to be with your franchise not only this year, but right now for the foreseeable short-term future, right? Obviously, I say short-term there because CJ is getting up there in age at this point, and I think his contract's only a couple years, so it's not like he's going to be there forever, but he is going to be there. It's not like, come off season time, he's getting traded again, more than likely. No, like, he'll be there next year. So if Zion doesn't play this year, he's still going to be his teammate next year. And if he started building that rapport and that chemistry now, that only makes it better for them in the future, right? So I think that's what we all initially think happens, but because it didn't happen and because that's so different from our perspective on what is expected of an athlete upon, a new teammate arriving or whatever, I think that engulfed the conversation of everything around Zion. And obviously a lot has been going on around Zion. I mean, I guess if you even want to look at my channel itself, right? My highest viewed video now is Zion. Is it time to label Zion a bust video that I released back on December 25th of 2021. And just here in the last, month, 2 months or so, that video has continued to gain more and more traction. I mean, in the last month-ish, that video is at 550 views out of 950 total. So it, really you call it the month of February, the late part of January, because of all this traction and the news constantly surrounding Zion, that video has done more than it did in its first month, its first shelf life month, or whatever you want to call it, which is kind of something you don't typically see, right? Now, yes, in part, that is, I guess, a reason why I'm making this video, because that video did so well, and because I am trying to grow my channel, but also, in that video, if you guys watched it, I talk about how much of a fan I am of Zion, right? I have Zion's jersey. I'm still looking at getting a Duke jersey of Zion's, because that's where I was the biggest fan of him, right? Obviously, with him not playing that many games for the Pelicans, that's where I know him the most from. When I think Zion, I think Duke immediately, and then I think Pelicans. Maybe something that the Pelicans want as what you initially think of when you think Zion, but I think it will always be that way because of what he did at Duke and because of how just crazy that year was with him at Duke. And so, yeah, I think, Zion will always kind of be, will he turn into a what if, I guess is a question, but he'll always be one of those guys that is going to get attention because of what he did prior to the NBA and because of the potential that he's viewed to have, and the ceiling that he's expected to reach in the NBA itself. But I guess if we kind of take a backtrack now, how did we get to this point? Where now rumors and talk about him being a bad teammate and all this is swirling. How did we get here? Well, obviously there's, Duke and everything that he did there. Then you see the NBA lottery where we see New Orleans get the first overall pick. It almost feels like a match made in heaven because they were looking to trade their star player anyways because he was disgruntled and didn't want to be with the franchise anyways. Well, shoot, here's a new franchise player. You get the number 1 overall pick. Don't mess it up, right? Is what the league told them. And Zion was the guy that, RJ prior to the Duke season was looked at as the number 1 pick, but the way that Zion was able to capture audiences, was able to play on the court, he quickly rose to the by far and away number 1 pick in that draft and looked to be a surefire superstar. So it almost felt like everything landed in the Pelicans' lap to hit a home run on the pick and on the future of their franchise. And so what they did was they traded Anthony Davis. They get more assets for him. They bring in Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram and all those guys. And then they draft Zion number 1 overall, right? And Zion comes to this team with, the former young Lakers, what, the Pelicans are also able to get as well with some of those other pieces and everything like that. And he comes onto this team, a team that still had Drew Holiday, right? And was a team that, even his rookie season was looked at, yeah, he is going to miss a little bit of time, but this team could probably still make the playoffs. I mean, it was looked at as a team where it looked like there were a lot of guys on this team that had the opportunity to pop into a better player. Lonzo being one, a number 2 overall pick. Brandon Ingram being one, another high overall pick. And even like Josh Hart, a glue guy kind of in the team, something that you see a lot in, winning teams. This team was looked at that with the addition, especially of Zion, they could be immediately back in the playoff contention race in a very, very deep Western Conference at that point, right? And they weren't, right? Zion obviously misses some time, comes in, plays his first game against the Spurs, shows a 3-point ability in that game, something that I think a lot of people expected, but also a lot of people overreacted in the other direction of that probably isn't going to stick for the rest of his career. And at this point, it hasn't. I mean, he's been an interior monster, right? But, we see him, get injured and then come back in partially way through the season, almost make a run at Rookie of the Year, even though he played so many less games compared to all the other guys that were in the conversation, but he doesn't end up winning it. And in his sophomore campaign, he is able to make the All-Star team, right? He is one of the most physically imposing forces throughout the league. He is constantly able to get his shots when and where he wants them under the basket. And though his defense doesn't show what it was at Duke, and in a large part that is why the Pelicans weren't able to be as successful as maybe they wanted to be, he's still, kind of, sorry, I'm trying to look for the word. He still is able to be that good, right? He's still able to be that good. And make an all-star team and everything like that. And, some of that is due to his popularity and everything like that. But he was, I think, shooting over 66% from the field and like scoring like 25 points per game, and was just carrying that Pelicans franchise that the team started to look less and less likely to have the proper pieces surrounding him. Then we, obviously we get to this summer, and Lonzo Ball is traded away to the Chicago Bulls, something that Zion didn't want to do. Over the last couple of years, we've continued to hear rumors of how his family maybe doesn't want him to be in New Orleans, how we've heard him talk about how he actually wanted and was hoping for the Knicks to get the number 1 overall pick. And then coming into this season, it looked like it was going to be another season for Zion. Nothing out of the ordinary. But what we immediately see is that foot injury pop up right, 2 weeks or so before the season. And that extends from being a 1 month long injury or whatever it was to he still hasn't played. And we are past the All-Star break, headed towards the latter half and kind of on that downhill stretch towards the playoffs now. And it looks like he might not play all season. He isn't even with the team. He's off in Oregon. Kind of just isolated, doing his own thing there. We've seen him in, 2K or Mountain Dew commercials or whatever it was with Zach LaVine, where he just looked absolutely massive. Then his weight became the conversation of, what's going on there. I think we all expect a little bit of body weight gain for a guy when it's there's a lower body injury, and you're losing some of that cardio that you're able to do when you don't have a lower body injury. But for a guy that was already bordering on the line of overweight just off of pure muscle mass, once he added not muscle mass weight to him, his body ballooned, and it was all over the internet, right? Some pictures it didn't look as bad, some pictures it looked like this guy could probably star in My 600-Pound Life. But regardless, that became the story that revolved around him for months until, again, we saw more and more setbacks. We weren't sure what was going on. More and more questions began to arise. And we get closer to the trade deadline, and we see Cam Reddish, his former Duke teammate, get traded to the New York Knicks to team up with, again, the number 3 overall pick in Zion's draft, R.J. Barrett, also his teammate at Duke. And those Knicks rumors start to kind of fly. Is Zion, potentially going to try and force his way out of the Pelicans to try and go to the Knicks? Is he going to kind of try and do what Ben Simmons was doing at the time and was successful in doing, and leave as a very, very young player, leave his franchise and go to a different one because he isn't happy with this situation that he's in? And, Zion, is he going to be the first player to ever decline the rookie supermax extension? In the recent era, right? We've seen stars leave. We've seen young stars leave in the past, right? It's not entirely this completely new thing to the NBA. I mean, you look at Shaq, right? A guy that felt like he was lowballed by the Magic, felt like he had more opportunity in the Lakers, and at that point, some of the rules and stuff that are in protection for lesser market teams and stuff like that now weren't in play. But we saw a young Shaq go to the Lakers and kind of go from there after being a dominant force with the Magic, right? And it felt like, Zion is a guy compared to Shaq, right? He's with that physically imposing, no one can match me at what I want to do type of play style and type of just look to him as a player. He kind of matches in that same type of mold with a Giannis, with a Shaq, and so that, that same conversation swirled up. Is he going to try and get out? Is he going to be, leave money on the table to get himself in a more favorable situation, not only on the court potentially, but also off the court, right? You look at New York as, I guess as Stephen A would describe it, it's the mecca of basketball. And New York is a basketball city at the end of the day. Yeah, you've got the Giants and yeah, you've got the Jets. Neither of those two teams have been good in the NFL for years, right? But the New York Knicks, regardless of the fact that they haven't been good, like the Giants are more recently relatively good, right? They won Super Bowls with Eli. But the Knicks, yeah, they had Carmelo and they made the playoffs a little bit, but the last time they were truly relevant, Michael Jordan was in the league, right? You had Patrick Ewing as your main guy. Yet this franchise, because they play in the Garden, because it's such an iconic place, because they're such a long storied and long tenured franchise of the NBA, and because of the city that it resides in, has continued to consume the entertainment of fans and just people that live in New York over some other sports, right? And New York is a spot that, like, they have the Yankees and everything like that, but at the end of the day, that's still a basketball town. The infrastructure of the town itself there are basketball courts built throughout the city to capture how much of a basketball town that is, right? When you think New York basketball, you think that street ball play where everybody from the neighborhood, it almost feels like, would be playing there. Now, I've never been to New York or anything like that, but that's the feel, that's the image I get in my mind, and it's continued to capture the people there. I mean, the depressed New York Knicks fan was a long time thing that was going on until they were able to make the playoffs this last year, because it felt like they were forever just ruined, in large part due to their owner and stuff like that. And Zion looked at that as an opportunity, to play with some other young players that he felt like he matched up with a little bit better. Obviously, he chose to go to Duke with them, right? But also, how much could his brand expand off the court? And so that's a large reason why that conversation continued to grow, and even at this point is continuing to grow, right? But that brings us to where we are now, right? The Pelicans feel desperate to keep him. They make a move for CJ to bring him in, and he's been brilliant with them. I want to say in his first 5 games he put up over 30 points in like 2 or 3 of them. Obviously we know Brandon Ingram is developing into potentially a superstar of his own right, and so without Zion, this team is almost in the play-in in a weaker Western Conference than we've seen in probably the past decade, and it leaves the question of, what if Zion was playing? What if he does leave? What if he does stay, right? All these questions just continue to swirl because of the lack of information coming out of Zion's camp itself at this point, and out of the Pelicans, because it almost feels like the Pelicans are in the same boat as us as fans or in the media, of absolutely no idea what is going on with this whole situation, right? And actually, I think, I mean, that really captures the premise of what I wanted to cover with this video. But one thing I saw on Instagram was this post of, it feels like Zion is the next Greg Oden, and not in the sense of his knee is longer or whatever like that, or yes, in part in the sense of, the injury prone star that looked to have all the potential coming out of college, but in the sense of the Greg Oden and the Kevin Durant, and then the Zion and the Ja Morant, right? We knew Kevin Durant was a really, really good college player, and we knew Ja Morant was a really, really good college player the year that he had at Murray State, right? But Kevin Durant was looked at as slim. Ja Morant was looked at as small and slim. And both of them were able to come to the league. Kevin Durant become an all-time great, if not the greatest scorer to ever play the game of basketball. Ja Morant to lead his team to the playoffs in only his second season, and then build on that somehow into his third season in, yes, a weaker Western Conference, but still a top-heavy, strong Western Conference. A Western Conference in the year where the Warriors resurged, where the Suns have the best record in the league, where the Lakers made moves this offseason to try and put themselves back in contender status, and that blew up in their faces, right? And then there's Zion, a guy that already in his career has made an all-star team, and we see the flashes and the power that he has on the court. Like, it wasn't like he went from being a man amongst boys in college. He's still a man amongst boys in the NBA against grown men who literally play basketball for their life. They don't have any classes to go to. They don't got to go sit in calculus or something like that, and then go play a game against Zion. No. They do this for a living, and he's still a man amongst boys when he's out there on the court. But that's the thing, is he's not out there on the court as much, and the question becomes, obviously, I think when you look at the Greg Oden and the Kevin Durant thing, many would say, yeah, clearly Portland messed up. Though when Greg Oden, Marcus Aldridge, and Brandon Roy played together, their record was pretty phenomenal. I think if you take the record, it was like 63-17 or something like that. It was like 60 wins and like in the teens of losses or something. And if you would have put that for like a full season, they would have been almost like a 70-win team or something like that. Obviously, injuries to all of them, mainly Brandon Roy and Greg Oden, led to that team not being what it could have potentially been. What if in its own right. But Kevin Durant is regarded as the guy that should have been picked number one in that class, and the questions begin to swirl of, should the Pelicans have taken Ja Morant? Should they have taken the guy that at this point has become the surefire thing? Ja Morant is going to be a star for his whole career. He's a guy that still has that high real potential that Zion has, but he's a guy that's consistent. He's a guy that's healthy, knock on wood, and he's a guy that's leading his team to success. Which is the big difference. He's healthy and leading his team to success, whereas Zion has been unhealthy and led his team to failure at this point in his career. So, I don't know. It does bring up about that question. Again, I am very biased in the matter of, I have a Zion jersey, I have a Ja Morant jersey. I like both those players. I really liked them in college, and I've continued to like, when I can see them on the court, what they've been able to do in the NBA as well. So, again, do take what I say with this subject with a bit of a grain of salt, but I did want to kind of revisit it, obviously, in part due to the traction that I was getting off of my last video, but also because of, the CJ news and all this kind of new stuff that's kind of come out about since then, and just how the situation just continues to be one of the most interesting and unique things to kind of ever happen in NBA history, honestly. For a number one pick to kind of be in this situation of nobody even knows what's going on with him, is kind of crazy, especially in the social media age that we're in, right? So, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to talk about Zion, I guess, really. I hope you guys did enjoy, though. Make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe for more. If you guys haven't seen my Tyrese Halliburton video, a guy that is playing and is developing into a star in his own right, make sure you guys go check that out. That video is doing super good from a couple days ago. But with that said, it's going to be your boy Dom. I hope you guys I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Appreciate y'all watching, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.